Good evening. Thank you for coming to this event, and thank you all Zoom viewers. Thank you for tuning in. I would like to begin. Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Good. Thank you. I'm Yuki Miyamoto, professor in the Department of Religious Studies, but I'm also the director. I'm privileged to serve as the director of the DePaul Humanities Center, and I'm very excited about this event. This is our first event collaborating with PAX, and I'm hoping that this is going to be followed by many. And but before we are starting, I would like to ask the Zoom audience to unmute yourself and also to turn off the camera. Not that we don't want to see you, but you know, just for technical reasons, that would be easier for us. Thank you. But I also want to add that we would like to take questions from the Zoom viewers as well as the floor. So, and I have some instructions, so give me a minute to get there. But first of all, this event, Professor Ken Badigan and Susanna Martinez, they are the ones who are behind this event, and I'm very, very grateful. And the procedure of this event is that I will introduce Professor Badigan, and he will introduce our guests. I'm very honored to be with them today, Ms. Kathy Kelly and Mr. Trey Baker, who is one of us, right? Student here. And also, I don't want to forget it, actually Trey has this very cool card with his signature on it, which is out there on the table, so please check it out. Also, yes, so after I introduce Professor Badigan, he will introduce two guests for today, and each will give a 20 minutes presentation. And after that, Professor Badigan is going to moderate a conversation among themselves and then open up the floor for Q&A. And in the end of the Q&A, I also would like to take some questions from the Zoom audience. So please write your questions in the chat box. And we may not be able to get to all the questions, but we would appreciate questions from you. Thank you. So before going further, I would like to introduce Professor Ken Badigan. He is a senior lecturer in the Peace, Justice, and Conflict Studies program here at DePaul University. In addition to teaching here for 20 years, he has worked in a series of movements addressing persecution of the unhoused, nuclear weapons, freedom for East Timor, the US wars in Iraq, and the Pledge of Resistance, a movement that helped end US military intervention in Central America and prevent an invasion of Nicaragua. He has published a series of books, including Pilgrimage Through a Burning World, about the movement to end nuclear weapons testing. He has worked with Peace Bene, I think, is this Italian or Latin? I'm not sure. But a nonprofit that has organized the nonviolent actions and trainings around the world, and has helped organize 2 conferences at the Vatican on nonviolence and just peace. So let us welcome Professor Ken Badigan.
Thank you so much, Professor Miyamoto, and all of you. We are here tonight to focus in a very particular way on a really interesting topic, which is we have more power than we think. And there's no better moment to understand this than now, when an unprecedented cataclysm is taking shape across our nation in real time right now, which is putting so many people across the United States and around the world at perilous risk. So I'm so grateful you're here, all of us, to reflect on that power that we actually have to respond. In the Peace, Justice, and Conflict Studies program, we take seriously the research that shows that over the last century, the only thing in most cases that has effectively curbed or ended dictatorships and authoritarian regimes is organized, nonviolent people power. For years now, and my students will remember this, I've said repeatedly the greatest social movement in human history is coming. Why? Because it has to. We see the need for a movement of movements that will be key to removing the supports that keep in place structures and policies of white supremacy, gender inequity, economic injustice, human rights violations, climate destruction, and perennial war. A movement of movements will be necessary to create the conditions toward justice and, for example, to restore and deepen the promise of DEI programming as a step toward racial equity. While this feels like a time of fear and powerlessness, it is precisely at this moment that we are called to unleash our true power. Not the destructiveness of violence, which is power over others, but power with. The power for good, for cooperation, for solidarity, for allyship, for the well-being of all. A power known as active, creative, and liberating nonviolence. Nonviolence doesn't always work, but social science research has now shown that violence works even less. Quantitative research now shows that over the past century, nonviolent strategies disrupting injustice and creating alternatives have been twice as effective as violent ones. But tonight, we get to learn about this power not through some stuffy review of statistics or graphs, but through the vision and power and experience of two amazing social change agents. In a few minutes, Kathy Kelly will share with us about her powerful journey as a relentless war resistor who has been jailed for justice many times and who has been nominated 3 times for the Nobel Peace Prize. But first, we're honored to welcome Trey Baker. Trey Baker has been nominated twice for an Emmy as a spoken word artist. For his creativity, he's received many awards, including the Honoring Our Own Excellence in Education Leadership Award, bestowed by the National Association of Latino Administrators and Superintendents and the National Alliance of Black School Educators. Trey serves with the Obama Foundation's My Brother's Keeper Alliance Leadership Network and its Chicago Action Team, working with county governments and school communities to facilitate comprehensive mentorship programming for boys and young men of color. He also performs around the country and internationally while having the opportunity to lead creative design and storytelling campaigns for a variety of organizations, including the Chicago Bulls and the Seattle Storm. His work involves developing culturally and historically responsive education frameworks for school districts across the country to drive narrative-changing engagements through the power of spoken word poetry. He has partnered with Scholastic to be the next Rising Voices mentor for the Rising Voices collection featuring the African diaspora, the teaching artist for the Our Greatness is Our Story spoken word program, and on top of that, the author of his first children's book coming out later this year. I'm also very happy to share that Trey is a senior here at DePaul in the Peace, Justice, and Conflict Studies program, and it has been such a gift to have him in this quarter's senior capstone course. So let's begin our evening with a rousing welcome for Trey Baker.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. All right, you sound good. You sound good. Thank you so much, Dr. Buttigieg, for that introduction. Again, I want to extend my deepest gratitude towards Dr. Miyamoto and Anna and the entire DePaul Humanities Center alongside Dr. Martinez, the director of the Peace. Where is she at? There she is. Got to meet her in person for the first time today, so it's a blessing to see her. It's truly been an honor to be able to learn from each and every single one of you to foster this next generation of change makers. And it is also a true honor to be in the presence with the pioneer, the legend, and the lover and warrior of peace, Kathy Kelly. It is my honor to be in community with you as well. I was told, yeah. There we go. So, just like June Jordan, one of my favorite poets, we're going to start with the children. And then in light of that, I want to start with a poem titled How We Start. They say moments of tragedy make us rise from the ashes, take off our armor, forget what we've done or what we've said, and though scattered on a plot, a regression line unifies its way through us. It is celebrated to the tune of a national ballad, and once again pride tastes so good to the palate, but the song eventually ends. We go back to where we came from, and we wait again. Wait for the next life to perish, the next land to be stolen, the next home shattered, the next injustice to rotten, the next child forgotten, the next, I wish I could have said I loved her one more time. I wish I didn't have to say goodbye. Waiting to end more lost than found, more broken than bound, to living, how are we beginning? In the first places we learn to walk, speak, ask, run, fail, fall, get up, and fly. How are we beginning the first moments we cry, have to say goodbye for the first time, to climb, because we can't see the top? What about the split seconds after the first time you hear something you don't like come out of another mouth? When you think you've caught feelings, but you're from the West and they're from the South. When something isn't what you've known, so you doubt. When you've had and now you're without, but somehow you find a way to smile. But since I'm racing against you, and you're racing against me, those beginnings we never get back. We just hope to win. And though one of us will claim victory, what follows is the inability to recognize the languages our foreparents wrote and expressed to resist what suppressed our difficult miracles of knowing how to love. It's a difficult miracle that we do it at all, that we've ever done it. After all, I think to myself, this is how we should start. With goodness to create, with cherishing the fact and sacrality of this life. A life not immune to the uncertainty of darkness, but saved by the unexpectedness of light. So with this as the ink in our pens, we write, fearlessly not waiting for the end, but capaciously opening the page to our worth in our world as we find and fight for when we arrive together. I imagine we might plant our feet deeper in the soil, take longer before we speak, stutter before we answer, lean in a little harder to a word we've never heard, move our bodies in a way we've never moved them before, experience a different vision, feel another soul's pain, uncomfortable and overjoyed because someone sees you for the first time, but it's about time. And without announcing itself, we suddenly begin again. Thank you. Now, in the spirit of beginning again, I believe the journey of nonviolence is not only a social journey that we take, but one of personal discovery and rebirth. My inception to the art of poetry came at a time in which I experienced a pivotal door that my voice was hiding behind. To find the courage to open it, I started to experiment with my sound, which ultimately brought me back to my roots and the search for my own history, to find meaning in the fight for educational equity and human liberation. As I began to evolve as an artist and as an educator, I started to recognize this method of creation unlocking a new path for the work of nonviolence, not only to reach the audience I perform with, but also with the brilliant children I share the canvases of classrooms with around the country. If I took you into one of our classrooms in Seattle, Prince George's County, Maryland, or the county juvenile detention centers, you would see this ancient and sacred and reimagined art form of poetics, capturing the language we speak, the depth of expression we write, the sounds we make together, the laughter we exuberate from an unexpected memory from the people in our lives, and the trust we have that stands as the foundation for which creativity and curiosity feel safe enough to take over the birth of an idea that transforms into a beautiful testimony of existence. How we use poetry is grounded in its nature to ask more questions about ourselves and the world around us, to better understand our places and our identities within them. It's one of the only art forms that we go inside the lives of each other through our own voices. We start with the interpretation to inspire vibrant dialogue. We put the words on the page over us like a warm garment as we translate what is happening in our minds, the complexities of different meanings to living a full life. It allows us to slow our thoughts down, making room for informative reflection that demands our spiritual, mental, and physical focus. It is here that we find the necessary inner peace to fight for peace external of ourselves. It allows us to find praxis, connecting the goal with the strategy. Poetry proves to us that thinking cannot exist without action, and action cannot exist without thinking. They need each other. And more broadly, using poetry as a practice guides personal and collective action, often leading towards greater opportunities for solidarity, reflection, and common understanding across differences. For the majority of our students, this poetic pedagogy is the first time they experience a safe and sacred space to present where they come from. It becomes an access point often denied to them in traditional K-12 teaching, often more concerned with centering the educator before recognizing students as experts of their own story. Hence, poetry becomes a vessel to reclaim their history. For example, our students cite that poetry is the first time they've experienced their ancestral connection to the Afro-Caribbean or Afro-Latin diaspora. I can hear them sharing poems about the smell of their abuelos' home-cooked tamales coming home from school, or the rich seasonings of oxtail and Barry's Hammond music playing in the family record player, passed down from generations, taking their spirits back to the island of Jamaica, where that love that fostered their creation began. Or the power and resilience of their mothers that found every way to love them. We also use this practice of poetry to connect our students to the planet through multi-sensory exercises that physically and spiritually take them to different places. Each student uses their language of imagination and wonder to ultimately find places within the universe they can travel to and belong. Global spiritual leader, poet, and peace activist Thich Nhat Hanh would describe this as the practice of arriving, of coming home. When you breathe in, you practice arriving. When you breathe out, you practice coming home. In other words, this demonstrates a reciprocal relationship with the present where in the here is the inhale. And then the now becomes the exhale. While crafting their poems, our students are safe in the physicality of the open space, affirmed in their internal navigation of the past and present, and empowered to have a relationship with silence, where they touch peace with their breath. This allows them to realize deep considerations of their own history in relation to their current sense of being, ultimately energizing the spiritual journey of their stories, beginning in their minds, traveling electrically through their fingertips onto the paper, and eventually through the honesty of their voices. At once, the basics of sentence structure, writing, tone, and figurative language introduced to them in earlier grade levels seem much more closer. What transformed these literary techniques into literary testimony was the inclusion of their freedom to draw from the deepest parts of who they are, and to share who they've become in the present and their curiosity of self for the future. And the same reality is the fact that our most marginalized children enter our places of learning judged by their presumed inferiority. This becomes so internalized that they consistently question if their voice is simply being appeased or being heard with great intention. Imagine walking the halls every day traumatized if anybody cares if you exist. The traditional education system as it stands suggests our children have their place. It's a place where too many of our minds have gone to rot and too many of our souls have gone to die. I'm here to tell you today that we are resisting that place where no promise, no opportunity, and no life exist. Rather, creating our own places of truth and sacredness of self with stories that make our dreams enduring and human connection possible. What oppressive education systems are telling our children is that they are disdained and that they would much better be off if they follow a pathway that makes them go away. We strategically house our poetry programming within school communities where children are present to disrupt the traditional standards for academic and human legitimacy. To be frank, we take seriously the voices of children. Our students' voices are not graded, contaminated with, or altered. Instead, their vibrations are raised to the highest levels of worthiness, excellence, and freedom. This relationship of literacy, resistance makes our children live forever. And that is just what we are doing and what we will continue to be called to do. I like to say poetry is the enemy of forgetfulness and the denier of ignorance. This practice, if intentionally woven into the fabric of our school communities, has the potential to make hatred remember where it came from. By acknowledging truths that were dismissed in the clouds of generational trauma, social norms, cultural pressures, thus making room for hope and understanding to prevail. Poetry is more than a creation, it's an access point to liberation. It empowers us to grow history, expanding what is possible. In her description of finding peace and discovering justice, the late, great Ruth Bader Ginsburg once said, quote, "The sound of the human is like an electric current going through me," end quote. We believe the more human voices we bring together, the more electricity we have to light our hearts to each other, to guide new ways forward. Ways of truth, ways of nonviolence, ways of love, each inextricable to the rhythmicity of a life worth living. I want to close with a reflection of my time here at DePaul and some of my fellow classmates who are, what's up, Bridget? Are here. And so I want to share this quick reflection with you as I close. When I assess the context in which we are joined here today, I'm reminded of one of the things I've learned is that you have to be honest and truthful about articulating the reality in which you exist. You can't hide or distract yourself from the problems in hopes to find a solution. When contextualizing my own identity, I think about the experience of African Americans in this country. It becomes a hard story to face sometimes that our foreparents were kidnapped and trafficked to this country just to face enslavement, where they were chained, beaten, lynched. And after the Civil War, they were promised freedom, but instead received terror, violence, and denying of basic civil rights, such as the right to vote, which the Constitution gave them. Still in this reality, they had to live in states where the law publicly humiliated them through Jim Crow and racial segregation, intentionally denying these opportunities because they were deemed less deserving, less valuable, and less worthy. We move into our current era with so much hope about the progress we made, yet we still find ourselves experiencing those inequities within our criminal justice system, lack of economic opportunity, and marginalization within our education systems. I'm compelled to say that we have to have courage to fully understand the moment we are in while having the ability to look back and comprehend our capacity. The boys and young men of color that I have the honor of teaching through the Obama Foundation's My Brother's Keeper Alliance, and the elementary and middle school children that I'm so deeply grateful to be a teaching artist to in our spoken word program, Our Greatness is Our Story, in partnership with Scholastic. They have brilliance in their minds and in their hearts with the promise of an education at their fingertips. Yet violence, incarceration, and social instability are the realities they face. Within our peace circles, they share their stories about being presumed dangerous, while recognizing the fact that with all their brilliance and intellectual fortitude, their education didn't shield them from those threats and social uncertainties. This is precisely why our peace and writers' circles exist, where our students' stories are empowered creatively to share and be discussed while learning to admit to the burden of what it means to be a young person on the periphery of society, experiencing tiredness, exhaustion, with having to navigate challenges they did not choose. Our circles are where feelings feel safe and not fighting them becomes liberating. In that same thought, we are using the power of education and nonviolence in non-traditional ways. We are using them to allow our students to become unapologetic about what it means to be a young person with a mission and a calling upon their lives. What's clear is what I do know in this season of life. I know when I look back, I have something truly powerful. This is the ability to say that despite slavery, lynching, segregation, humiliation, and mass incarceration, I am still here. I'm here lifted by my grandmother, who lived through the terrors of the Ku Klux Klan, was part of segregated schools in the South, and would later make the trip to Chicago's West Side. She worked 2 to 3 jobs so my father could have a good education, be safe, and grow up to be the father he never had. She invested in his mind even when it was dangerous. My grandmother and great aunt took care of children who weren't even theirs because they believed that for as long as they were on this planet, they would reach into their souls so that generations after them would truly experience freedom. These women gave the gifts of spirituality, hard work, kindness, and curiosity to my father so he would give them to me. And I truly believe my grandmother understood that feeding her children her stellar collard greens was going to make their stomachs full. But feeding their minds was going to put a light upon their life that would lead their spirits to believe that we can overcome. So yes, we have to take care of our minds to be aware, conscious, and curious about the world around us. But what I also cherish from my grandmother is that you have to have a full heart. You have to protect your heart. Despite injustice, people found ways to love one another enough to create further generations. My father trusted my grandmother in her sacrifices because she loved him. He didn't have to question because he knew how much she loved him. You don't have to question when you experience love passing through the boundaries of your skin and into the core of your very being. That same love is why I'm here tonight. And it's that kind of love that will fight so hard to keep us connected, keep us from turning around, keep us persevering, keep us learning, and keep us telling stories that keep us alive. Thank you.
so much, Trey. I'm going to invite us to take 30 seconds and just sit and let what Trey just unleashed roll over us. Let it sink into us. Let's take a moment with what Trey has brought. Now it's my distinct pleasure to introduce Kathy Kelly. Kathy's efforts to end war began during the time of the Vietnam War and has led her to live in war zones and prisons over the past 4 decades. Kathy has protested nuclear missile silo sites, the bombardment of Yemen, the occupation of Gaza, and U.S. drones. Kathy's the president of the board of World Beyond War. In 1996, she helped found Voices in the Wilderness, a group that bore witness to the suffering which the U.S. and UN imposed sanctions visited upon the people, especially the children of Iraq. Then from 2005 to 2020, she worked with Voices for Creative Nonviolence, an organization that continued and expanded that work, including opposition to U.S. economic and military warfare in the Middle East. Since the Taliban takeover of Afghanistan, she has co-coordinated an international network to assist young Afghans forced to flee the country. She was just telling me that over 100 people have been freed through these efforts. On a personal note, I first met Kathy in the late 1980s, way back in the last millennium, when we were both participants in an activist national conference that took place here at DePaul. I believe it was down in the pit in SAC. I am deeply grateful that she is here tonight to share with us. Please join me in welcoming Kathy Kelly.
Well, good evening. I was looking forward to being here with you, and I want to thank Yuki and Susanna and Anna and Ken for helping us be in touch with Trey's notion that poetry denies forgetfulness. And thank you, Trey, for helping us join you in remembering your beautiful grandmother, and your presence here certainly helps us wake up. So I've been entrusted with a couple of questions that I don't have answers to. I just can't help but look at Jerica, who teaches many of you, and she was a co-worker with me at Voices, and she will guarantee you this woman doesn't have all the answers. As we tried, but we didn't stop very many wars, to be honest. But there was a time when a number of us, and I'm going even before when I first met Ken, a number of us were pretty alarmed that maybe the nuclear bombs really would fly. It was the height of the Cold War, and there just didn't seem to be much assurance that the Soviet Union or the United States wouldn't at some point launch a nuclear missile, and what could we do? And so, you know, there were some options. I had lowered my salary beneath the taxable income. I didn't want to pay for weapons. We did a number of conferences and different kinds of actions, but there seemed to be a sense we could do more. So a number of us for a year got together in, well, after the soup kitchen at St. Thomas Canterbury Parish, we'd go over to my apartment and sit down and think, and finally we came up with what we thought was, okay, this makes sense. Farmers in Missouri plant corn. But there were 1,500 intercontinental ballistic nuclear missiles planted under the ground, 150 of them surrounding Kansas City. So we thought about planting corn on top of, well, that got me a year in prison. So I planted corn on top of a nuclear missile silo site with my 16 different friends. And I remember it was really quite a beautiful morning. I was little bit nervous, like, how am I gonna get inside this missile silo site? And I had a big tablespoon and my 6 pink kernels of corn, and I did my sort of first and only agricultural act and planted the corn, and then went and sat on top of the lid of this intercontinental ballistic nuclear missile to see what would happen. Well, the birds were chirping and the crickets were creaking and mist rising up off the, and then I saw speeding toward where I was inside this chain link fence, a big vehicle with a machine gun mounted on top, and it skidded to a stop and gravel flying everywhere, and out came 4 soldiers in full military garb, the helmet, the combat boots, walkie-talkies, camouflage rifles, and I was going to do whatever they said. And so they gave me the orders, stand up, arms in the air, step to the left, step to the right, and they had the keys. So I was outside the nuclear missile silo site, kneeling, handcuffed in the ground, and 3 of the soldiers took off and left one soldier with his rifle aimed at me, and well, we were alone, and I think I lasted about 2 minutes in silence, maybe not even. And then I just started spilling out, well, we did what we did because we were concerned for children in the Soviet Union, and we hope it would help children in your life, and do you think the corn will grow? And he's behind me, I never turned around, and I'm handcuffed, but he said, I don't know, ma'am, but I sure hope so. And then I said, would you like to say a prayer? Yes, ma'am. So I dragged off a memorized prayer, the St. Francis Peace prayer that ends, grant that I may not seek so much to be consoled as to console, to be pardoned as to pardon, to be loved as to love with all my soul. And he said, amen. And then he asked me a question. Ma'am, would you like a drink of water? And I said, oh yes, please. And then he said, ma'am, please tip your head back. I can still feel the water dribbling down my chin. So I don't know, he had a rifle, but he didn't have the rifle in his hands when he gave ma'am a drink of water. I don't know what he did with the gun. But he squeezed that water down ma'am's throat. He did an act of kindness for a complete stranger, and I never want to forget him. He's one of my moments of poetry, Trey. Well, could we hang on to that question? Ma'am, would you like a drink of water? And I want to tell you another story. I was in Afghanistan, and Jarek had gone there, I went there, and we went back and forth, back and forth. We were always the guests of young teenagers, a little bit older than you, but so hospitable. They welcomed us really beautifully. And while we were there in 2015, well, let me just tell you, I have O negative blood, and it's sort of user-friendly if other people need blood. Mine is the kind that some of you are saying, yeah. So every time I went to Kabul, I would go to the Italian Surgical Center for Victims of War, run by Italians we'd met in Iraq, and donate blood. But I asked the doctors, are you still treating survivors from the hospital in the province of Kunduz? We heard that those who survived, no longer had a hospital because the U.S. had bombed it, and some of them came to you. And the doctor taking the blood said, oh, Allora, yeah, he's so lonely, you go see. And so they told me and my young friends to go see Khalid Ahmed. Khalid Ahmed had been a pharmacist, a student pharmacist. His mother in Kunduz province, which is 5 hours away from Kabul, said, do not go to work today, it's too dangerous. The Taliban are fighting the government troops. And he said, Mom, who's gonna fight in a hospital? Well, he went for the night shift, and then he was to sleep and then start his shift again in the morning, and there was a huge explosion. And so Khalid Ahmed and the chief pharmacist ran upstairs, and they said to security, what's going on? And the security said, well, the Taliban don't have airplanes, so it must be the Americans. And indeed it was. There are these huge planes called C-130 transports. And this C-130 transport was outfitted with Beaufort cannons and incendiary devices. And for over an hour, they kept circling around and coming back, and the head of the hospital was frantically calling NATO and United Nations and US government officials and telling everybody, you're bombing a hospital. They bombed the intensive care unit and the emergency room into smithereens. So when Khalid Ahmed and the chief pharmacist approached security, the security people said, look, these planes have laser guided ways, take your cell phone apart. So they took their cell phones apart, and then they said, now what? And they said, well, you just have to run for it. Man, run. And so the chief pharmacist ran for the gate as fast as he could, and then they said to Khalid, okay, it's your turn, you gotta go. And so Khalid ran as fast as he could. He got to the gate, and he took shrapnel in his back. He fell to the ground. He was bleeding profusely, going dizzy. And in Afghan tradition, if you are facing your death and you can contact your family, you do. But he took the cell phone apart. So he managed with the one arm that wasn't paralyzed to get the cell phone out, put it back together, reached his family. Blessedly, his father said, my son, tell me exactly where you are. He said, the front gate. And then he lost consciousness after his dad had said, take off your vest to stop the bleeding. And he did that. And his relatives lived very close by. They sped in a car. They found his broken body. They loaded him into the car. It must have been tortuous if he woke up, but he made it the 5-hour trip to the Italian Surgical Center for Victims of War. And when I met him, he was, well, quite thin. He still had an internal catheter, an IV, sallow in complexion, and it exhausted him just to tell us his story. And then he looked at me, and he asked my young friends, well, who is she? And they said, our grandmother. And he said, and where is your grandmother from? And they said, America. He fixed a gaze on me, and he asked me, why would your people want to do this to us? We were only trying to help people. Why would our people want to do this to Khalid Ahmed in the hospital where 41 people were killed and 13 were his colleagues, his fellow staff? They were only trying to help people. Well, it's a bit of a green light. When the United States bombs a Doctors Without Borders hospital, then other countries say, well, and so the next year, Saudi Arabia, using weapons supplied by the United States with training from the United States, bombed in Yemen another Doctors Without Borders hospital. And the UN people said, you can't do that. You just can't bomb hospitals. And the Saudi general that was being addressed said, well, we'll ask our American advisors what they think. Well, can you bomb hospitals? My friends, today in Gaza, every hospital in the Gaza Strip is inoperable. They can't operate. And so I want to go to a few slides that I think helped me to try to approach the challenge that Ken gave us at the beginning of our time together. And Anna, thank you for helping me get to this first slide. It's a curious slide. What you'll see is a man in a white coat, and he's walking, oh, thank you. He's walking toward two, not one, but two tanks. And this is Dr. Hussam Abu Safia, and he was the director of the Kamal Adwan Hospital. And this hospital was bombed. So many of his colleagues had been treated in very dehumanizing ways. Some were killed, and he now is still in prison. And he's been in prison for well over a month. No one's been able to reach him except his son learned that he's in critical condition because he's been tortured so badly so far. And so we have to ask, where is Hussam Abu Safia? This doctor who was like our friend Khalid, trying to help people. And he's walking through the rubble and walking alone. And here we are in a Catholic university, and I think about Simon of Cyrene helping Jesus carry the cross, and I think, oh, I wish there was a Simon of Cyrene right now with Dr. Hussam Abu Safia in this very lonely and very hard route that he's been taking. And when I think about Khalid Ahmed and the people who endured so much bombing and displacement and starvation and terror in Afghanistan, and then I think about what's still buried under the ground. War isn't over when it's over, because the munitions could still explode, the children could still be affected. This is Paul Seaworthy's photo taken from the mountains of Afghanistan. And so I wanted to ask you to look with me at this very unusual cartoon. And I'll tell you a little bit more about where it came from in just a moment. But notice that the figure with war printed on the back of his vest doesn't really look like a human being. You don't see a face. You don't really get a chance to identify with a person. But you do see that the sword is bloodied. And then when you look at the tables where people are seated, look at the little guy in the back at the education table. There are cobwebs over the globe. It hasn't spun for so long. It doesn't look like he's getting much education. The doctor doesn't have anything at the healthcare table. The cello back at the arts table is broken. All of the tables are empty, and then bringing platters of the nutrient, basically, which is cash, are people who I found out through researching more about this. They're supposed to be the ministers of the countries following World War II. And so that would be President Truman with the knife slashing through the dollars, and with the monocle you would see Winston Churchill with a pile of British pounds, and then Minister Planet from France with the French francs, and then in the back, and it kind of looks like that's a swastika on the lapel of the fellow who's got the German money, and that would be Konrad Adenauer. Now, who made this cartoon? I was looking, it must be an American cartoon. No, the cartoonist was in 1952 in Russia for a Russian comic book called Crocodile, and his name is Yuli Gumpf. So I felt like this sort of withstood the test of time. And what he captioned it, Mr. Gumpf captioned this, at an American restaurant, only one person gets served. But when we look at those other tables, well, don't you kind of wish that people could get their tables together? But why do they have to be so isolated? When Ken talks about the movement of movements, people have to start moving. And I think again about the New Testament scriptures. Jesus kind of went up there and tipped the table, didn't he, when he went in the temple? So maybe there's still more that we can learn about where we're putting our resources and why, and what we can do differently. Remembering, of course, that war isn't over when it's over. So this is a similar cartoon. It turns out this one started from a Russian image also, but the French got a hold of it. And this one shows a pyramid, tiered pyramid. At the very top, the money. And the people who are the rulers, and underneath them, the preachers and teachers maintaining the rule. And then you have the militarists in the next tier, and then the people who kind of can eat, drink, and be merry and laugh. But look who's on the bottom. People who are bent over, crushed, oppressed. And the person who initiated this, not the first version of this cartoon, actually was living under the Russian Tsar and Tsarina. And he said, I'm warning you, if the people stand up, the whole thing can tip over. So what does it mean for us to stand up and stand with one another? We do get good advice. The works of war as opposed to the works of mercy. The works of war destroy crops and land, seize food supplies, destroy homes, scatter families, contaminate water, imprison dissenters, inflict wounds and burns. and kill the living. So of course we want to be about the works of mercy. And of course, all of you are finding your own ways, your own roots, to be part of those works that you believe in, to look for ways to be of service rather than dominance, to share resources more radically, to find ways to live more simply. And these are things that we learn from one another with the spirit of a university. We catch courage from one another, not only from one another in this room, but from people who've gone before or who are on their way out the door. We catch that courage, but we have to be really, really open to it and be open to the possibility that it's time to say, we're sorry and we need forgiveness. And so I think about Hindrajab, the 5-year-old who loved to dress up as a princess. She was in a car following orders with her uncle and aunt and 3 cousins, and they were told, get out, you have to be forcibly displaced or we could bomb you, and they bombed the car anyway. And Hind was left eventually alone in the car, begging 2 young women at the switchboard of the Red Crescent Society, please come and get me, I'm so scared. And they said, the ambulance workers are close, they're so close, but they couldn't leave until they could get clearance that it was safe to go out on the road, because otherwise the Israelis might have bombed the ambulance and it would be suicidal. They were within 56 meters of saving little Hindrajab. And they were killed by tank-fired missiles manufactured in the United States. And so when the students at Columbia University threw this sheet out the window and renamed Columbia University's Hamilton Hall Hind's Hall, they threw love out the window. And so, my friends, let's all promise one another, we're gonna throw love out the window. In creative acts, in courageous acts, in honest acts. I want to close, because Trey said he'd help me, with a song. Beat the drum for that.
Okay.
With a song that women at Grenham Common sang. And these women camped out surrounding a nuclear missile silo base. And I want to mention, we do have the Close the Bases event coming February 23rd for World Beyond War. They camped out for years. And they had a song, and it's a bit sing-songy, so I asked Trey to help me put some life to it. The sing-songy version is, you cannot take away everything. You cannot forbid us to think. You cannot stop the tears that flow. And you can't stop the song that we sing. Okay, Trey. Do you have your lyrics? There it is back. So you cannot take away everything. You cannot forbid us to think. You cannot stop the tears that flow, and you can't stop the song that we sing. You cannot take away everything. You cannot forbid us to think. You cannot stop the tears that flow, and you can't stop the song we sing.
Again, I would, I would invite us to take a moment and really let what Kathy Kelly just shared with us sink in. So we're going to take a few minutes and just do some reflection together on what's been shared. And I guess I would like to invite Kathy for you to share something that you heard from Trey that really struck you, that you're really taking away from tonight.
Well, Trey, I really want to be part of that poetry that remembers, that defies forgetfulness. I think that art helps us see things in a different way, and so it also requires the willingness to see things differently. And I think that you, by highlighting the children and saying, look, these little voices are deserving of an audience. They need to be heard. It's their world. They're going into that future. And so to hear those voices and give the sense of not only approval, but desire, to be desirous of those voices being heard. That was very powerful. Thank you.
And Trey, Kathy Kelly has shared stories and the importance of responding in this moment, to say we're sorry, to ask for forgiveness, but also to take action. And I just wonder, is there something from what you heard from Kathy that you're taking away from what she shared?
Absolutely. I think Kathy's journey, from my view, is in the most horrific circumstances and the most terrifying instances. She found ways to humanize people and sterilize hate in a way that shocks your conscience and makes you remember why you're on this planet, and that we need to protect our planet, and that the only way it fosters is if we get together to get together. And I thought her just stories about humanizing one another, to disarm, to remember, I thought was quite insightful for me and affirming of the work that we do, of why we get together to do this work.
So tonight is about stories. You shared amazing stories. You've shared powerful and poignant ones, Kathy. And so a story comes to mind for me that I heard from a couple of activists from Chile. Some of us may know Chile suffered a bloody coup in the early 1970s, and it was mowing down the progressive forces in the country. And a handful of people, maybe the size of us here, gathered in the basement of a building and said, we need a nonviolent revolution in Chile. And the first thing they did was that they decided to train themselves in these strategies of nonviolent change. And they took actually a couple of years to train about 200 people. And then 200 people, those people, each one went out to teach one. So that by about 10 years into it, 30,000 people a year were being trained in what became the backbone of the movement that actually brought that dictator down. We're in a moment when this country is facing great challenges and the possibility of that kind of authoritarian regime in real time. So if we can imagine that we're actually in the basement and we're putting our heads together, and I guess this isn't just a presentation, it's really a kind of nonviolence training in a way for this power that we haven't necessarily tapped, but you two are inviting us to tap it. So I guess I would like to hear from the two of you, in a way, what would be in that training? What are some really key things we have to get into our right brain as we face this moment? And whoever'd like to start would be great.
Well, I was in Jordan with people a little bit younger than this audience, maybe Leah's age actually, Ken's daughter here. And I showed them a slide of the global representation of military bases. And there are probably about 900 military bases worldwide, and the United States controls most of them, about at least 800 or so. And so I said, well, let's just do a thought experiment. I give each one of you a base, but you can't have any weapons, and you can't have any soldiers trained to kill. What would you do with your base? Well, they were immediate. Oh, I would create a major hospital. I'd create a place to teach languages. I'd experiment with solar and wind power. All kinds of good things that they could. I'd create a space for refugees. Good things they could do with their base. And I think that one of the things I felt proud of that day, in a way, was that, you know, I told you about Khalid and the C-130 transport. Just the day before, the King of Jordan, who's in DC right now, asking our president, could you please not shove the people of Palestine off their land and think you can push them into Jordan. It's very hard for him right now. But he was on one of those C-130 transport planes used again and again to bomb places, and they stacked it full of food and medicine. And that the exact same model of aircraft was used to fly over the land and drop medicine and food. Now, it's not the total solution, but what are the ways that we can transform the militarism? You know, think about it. How far would you have to walk from wherever you're living right now to be at some place that's very connected with the US military? When Jarek and I were living in Uptown, whoa, it's kind of scary. Well, not far. We could go this way and we're at the Armory, go that way, oh, there's a Marine Recruitment Center, go downtown, they're raising money. So how can we imagine transforming that militarism into something that really helps us address what we're facing that's terrifying? And, you know, that's nuclear weapons, it's ecological collapse, it's a new pandemic. If we collaborated with other countries instead of demonizing them, and how often that came up in what Trey spoke of. If people came together, then we might survive.
I think if I could add to that, I was just in Virginia, working in Loudoun County Public Schools. I'm doing a poetry workshop series. When I told folks that I was doing it and I was going to Loudoun County, they said, "Where?" Because it's a predominantly conservative area, and the night after we did our poetry workshop, it was about 80 students, middle school and high school students, got to talk about this idea of forever. How do they find their forever in their voices and their stories and their histories? And their superintendent was there, and he talked about the importance of loving the children. And the next night, the school board was going to put up, or a school board member, I should say, was going to put up a motion to dismantle the diversity and equity and inclusion and accessibility department. The same department that brought me there to uplift these 80 students' voices. And I watched that school board meeting, and I watched this lady bring up the motion to dismantle the department. It's about 9 members on the school board, and they showed the vote, and 8 of them said no, and there was only 1 yes. In the same room that they were holding that vote was the same room that we did the workshop. And I thought that was incredible symbolism of the forces that be, that the arc of justice will always bend in the right way. But we have to fight for it. We can't take it for granted. And in the spirit of poetry, for me, it's about, again, bringing those collection of voices together. I'm a big jazz fan. I grew up on Coltrane, Miles Davis. All right, yep, Dr. Best knows what's up. And I think poetry is the same way. We're playing in open air. We're riffing off of one another. And that's how we can, I think that's a pathway with how we can speak and find language to make sense of our current times and find ways to reimagine them. And so I think if we can get back to that place of again, utilizing our history, remembering that, restoring that, reclaiming that, in spaces where they rather not tell the truth. I think we're in a resilient pursuit of the truth. And we got to keep that truth and protect that truth. And so I think with poetry and the work that we're doing with students and the work that I'm writing is to try to find those truths and open our hearts and open our minds to those truths so that we can find a better way forward.
So we all are participating in a brainstorming session to figure out how we go forward in the present moment, which is very perilous. And what I heard from the two of you was, first of all, have a big vision. It's important to shake off the paralysis and fear of this moment. A big vision. We'll all get a base. Chicago can be a base. DePaul can be a base where we really imagine what really should be happening. But then you shared with us a story, Trey, of a very concrete step in that direction. You're going into a school. In your present, the superintendent is talking about love.
Right.
I don't know if that's what superintendents do. They're talking about love. And the next night, that superintendent votes against bringing down DEI in that school. In a time when, in fact, I think you were telling me that it was because.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it was, the fact that the superintendent got to be there for the workshops, I think was another just affirmation of what it means to bring love into places that we commune. And we were talking, love is a very taboo word in school systems. But like I opened up, we have to start with the children. We have to cherish children. We have to start, we have to find ways to start better. I think we get to the end and it's a cycle. Man, I wish I could have said this, or I wish I could have done this. But what if we took that same energy and put it in how we started with one another? I think if we're to move forward from here, just trying to find ways to tolerate, I think we're in some trouble.
We are so grateful for what you just shared, and now we're going to open it up. And Anna has the mic. If you have a question or a comment, or maybe an idea for the world we need, let's have at it.
We especially invite the students who are here to offer their questions and their ideas. So just raise your hand and I'll bring the microphone over.
Hi, my name is Carrie. I'm in the PAX program with Trey and Ms. Boutigan. And I want to thank Trey as well as Kathy Kelly for coming in and really opening our minds to how we can change the world and be change agents. And because it feels like we're all so, we feel kind of helpless in a situation, but it's important for us to remember that we have the power to make change. And we have way more power than we think, especially when we come together as a unit. I want to ask about what would draw attention to, as well as ask about generational, because it's Miss Kathy is in the older generation, Trey's in our generation, but Trey's also.
I got an old soul though, just so you know.
But Trey's also talking about the children, and so I want to ask you guys, how do you guys work on bringing all generations together and making change for the world ahead?
Great question.
Well, I think the Indian people following Mohandas Gandhi gave us a big gift when they said, look, hang on to truth force. Satyagraha, hang on to truth. And the truth of the situation we're facing right now is that Elon Musk Mark Zuckerberg and Mr. Bezos have a combined worth of $903 billion. Now that's more than what you might consider like the lower half of US society. That's more than 170 million people possess. These three people have that. And since President Trump was elected, their wealth has soared. Elon Musk has become $138 billion richer. Zuckerberg has become $49 billion richer. Bezos has become $28 billion richer, and that's just since election day. So the more that they have, the less there is for others. And there seems to be a very false notion that somehow they have a right, an automatic God-given right, to a bigger piece of the pie than everyone else. But then I have to say to myself, Kathy Kelly, you live in the country where people quite often have more access to resources at cut-rate prices than other people in other parts of the world. And what protects that? What allows that? Well, it's part bullying. And we're seeing President Trump bully. I mean, if you were ever on a playground and you saw the bully at work, that's, it seems to me, what we're seeing in the foreign policy of the United States. So I just want you to know that as a speaker, I kept my eyes on your face and you got me through this talk because I could see you were nodding and giving approval. Go ahead, go ahead. And I think exactly what you did during this talk, and maybe, you know, you do it all through all of your classes and all of your encounters, but that's what I mean about catching courage from one another. To keep on encouraging one another, give the nod, give the benefit of the doubt, but also encourage, prizing, celebrating, living simply. Who wants to be a selfish, greedy, weapon-slinging billionaire? I mean, you might think you want to be that person, but you can't take it with you. And then the other thing is, you know, a more radical definition of what it means to share resources. Can you share your car? Can you share your income? Can you share your, you know, leftover clothing and repurpose it? You know, constantly encouraging one another to find ways to share resources, and then thinking in terms of Mother Earth. Why should we be on top if there are many, many, many species, right? So sharing resources, and then more radical ways to resist injustice. And that's, I want to say, hats off to your student generation, because you're facing a lot of pressure and punishment and uncertainty, and it's not going to be an easy road to hoe. There are people who went before you, right here at this university, who took on a lengthy fast because their beloved Professor Norman Finkelstein was being edged out. So read about that history. He was a child of Holocaust, people that were killed in the Holocaust. But he has spoken out. His whole world, the whole world is his classroom now. And he's just been in Oxford University in the UK, speaking out on behalf of the Palestinians. This person whose loved ones had suffered through the Holocaust. So it's not going to be an easy time, but I believe that as I look at this audience, you know, there's a fair amount of diversity in this room, huh? And we all, I'm sure, have more privilege than the people that are starving and living in tents and hoping not to be bombed tonight. But in that chance to catch courage from one another, I think we can create that world wherein it's easier to be good. And the Sermon on the Mount isn't a bad start.
Other questions?
Sorry to make you pass the mic all the way over here. First of all, I wanted to say that I love both of your speeches. You're both brilliant speakers, and I loved everything you had to say. If you could give maybe, oh, I should introduce myself. I'm Elliot. I'm a journalism student here at DePaul. If either of you could give one or two like concrete examples of an action that we as students could take to sort of take advantage of this idea of more power than we think. Just like something, could be small, it could be large, but just like one concrete thing that we could leave this room with a goal in mind.
Yeah, I think my main man to the right of me always talks about we need to create a movement of circles. It was very warm to see that, you know, we do that in our spoken word programming. All of our students write in circles, greet each other in circles. We did this cool thing called PIE's Check-In. So PIE stands for how are you doing physically, how are you doing intellectually, how are you doing emotionally, and how are you doing spiritually. And when I introduced that to the children, all the administrators in the back pull their phones out and take a picture of that slide, and they come up to me and say, Trey, you know, I need to do this with my wife. But the point I'm trying to say is that a small thing I think we can take from this convening is finding more ways to check in on one another, because I think that is resistant to a world in which we are being forced to go 1,000 miles an hour, compete against one another, and hope to win. And so I think the more spaces that we can find to just be and ultimately become, I think that is going to get us to a place where we can feel more comfortable and empowered meeting people that we do know, some that we don't, and allowing our voices to come together in more creative ways. Because I think sometimes just our nature as students, right? Like we're going from class to class, we got this going on, we don't have as much time to just get together. So I think doing those check-ins, telling somebody you love them, those things resist a system that is telling us to race to the top. I think that's the power of language, is that we can use it in different ways to check in, love, disagree, but ultimately come back to our more human self.
Thanks, Elliot, for your question, and thanks, Trey, for that. You know, in almost every neighborhood in this big quilt that we call Chicago, you'll find some place where people on a weekly basis, maybe a daily basis, roll up their sleeves and maybe they prepare a meal, or they organize a place to give shelter, or they do some kind of food distribution, some sort of way to meet other people's needs. Maybe it's a Catholic worker house, maybe it's a parish distribution center, but if you can find, and you know, here I am talking with students, and if I tried to do any of your days, I'd have a cardiac arrest. I know that you're, you know, studying full time, and you're working part-time jobs, and you're commuting back and forth, and trying to say hi to your parents once in a while, and it's hard. But if you can build into your life some connection with the people that are trying to share with others, I think that's great. The other thing, if you're so inclined, look for Jewish Voice for Peace. They are so organized. Their demonstrations are incredibly creative and organized, and they've got national heft, and they will welcome you. And you know, it may be that you're not able to take action on your campus at this point in history, but it's a big city. And so find those places where you want to be with the kindred spirits. And it'll be, I think, one of the best learning experiences. And then when it's time to write your paper, talk to your professor and say, look, I have to make sure this paper coincides with, intersects with the real problems that I'm thinking about. Or, ask your professors, please help us, teach us about these very real problems we're facing. Ecological collapse, nuclear annihilation, phenomenal racism showing its monstrous head in every direction, and then what happens next, war after war after war. Say, this is what we need to study. And then thank Dr. Yuki Miyamoto, and thank Anna, and thank Dr. Susanna, and thank Ken Budigan, and thank Trey.
So what I'm hearing, I just want to build on what you're both saying, because we can't change the world by ourselves. We'll be destroyed by it. We need other ordinary, beautiful, cranky people. So in light of what you're both saying, I think to get with 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 others, meet once a week, you'll have each other's back, and then there will be things that you'll go, there is this demonstration that I heard about because of Kathy Kelly or Trey Baker or somebody on campus. And we can train ourselves and be there vulnerably for one another. I want to thank, again, Kathy Kelly and Trey Baker for bringing your wisdom, your stories, your commitment, your passion, and your call to action to all of us. And we're so grateful for all of it. And what's that?
One more question.
One more question.
Is that okay? I'm afraid that this is going to be the last question, but this is from a Zoom audience, so I would like to take one. The question is this: how do you work with people who insist that there is no completely non-violent way to combat injustice? For example, those who believe the only way to combat immense violence, like what the Palestinians are experiencing, is with violence.
I can remember having 2 mentors who were older than I am now, and they had a one-line answer to that. They'd gone all through the civil rights movement, they'd been pulled off buses and beaten, they'd been imprisoned, they'd done long fasts. And Maurice McCracken and Ernest Bromley echoed in unison almost. The means you use determines the end you get. The means you use determines the end you get. And war isn't over when it's over. So you will hear people who argue in favor of armed struggle. Having been in war zones, including Gaza, I'm not willing to say that the issues of how to create a more just world will be resolved through bloodshed. Our young Afghan friends would say, blood doesn't wash away blood. So I want to be respectful and listen to all those who say, yes, we do believe in armed struggle. I want to listen, and I want to care deeply. But I believe that it would be better to place one's life in the line of fire than to pick up the gun and shoot.
And on that powerful note, we're very grateful for all of you being here tonight. Thank you, Trey. Thank you, Kathy. We want to thank the Humanities Center and the Peace, Justice, and Conflict Studies program for bringing us all together. And I would invite us to take 1 minute and turn to a neighbor and just reflect on what is coming up for you for the last hour and a half.
Yeah! Somebody say yeah. So this poem is called Love Is. This poem's called Love Is. Forever starts where love begins in the little things we do.
Love can change your point of view, uncover your light, let your light shine through if you let it. Like finding soul on an Al Green record. Play it over and over again so you never forget it. Love lies in the human formation. I challenge you to trade in your phone for a real conversation. It's okay to talk to somebody from a different generation. Feel the vibration, ripple across one love, one nation, under a groove. Funkadelic is how I move, spreading the essence of love to improve our way of seeing, our way of being. Love is in our elegance, shines through our excellence. With my pen, with my voice, I'm the love artist in residence. Together we can lead a love exodus from the isms that censor our speech, divide the starving from the elite, lock our feet from marching towards the beat of progress. Love is the promise we keep to our land, even though the promised land wasn't always promised land. Let the freedom of our oceans crash the shores, washing away the lines in the sand. I want to see all the soul brothers and sisters jam, and let love be the master plan. Love is a collection of memories, moments of movement, transcended through time, majestic imagination in my mind, while I see the images of life rewind. It's in the stories of the divine. It helps to heal the hearts of souls of a community when another child dies of a senseless crime. Sometimes I cry. Sometimes I get on my knees and ask why. Please give me a sign. Let us redefine and assign our hands and hearts to each other and resign our spirits to hate one another. Love is here to stay. Even though cynicism wants to hunt us down like prey and wants us to go a different way, don't walk away from you and your gift to make this world better. DePaul, this is my love letter. And in these words and in these verbs of hope, we get further and further from never and closer to find it forever. Peace.
I just want to thank everybody. It's a cold night in Chicago, so thank you for coming out and being part of this wonderful, warm community. I want to, thank our wonderful guests and our dear Professor Budigan. Thank you, Yuki and Anna at the Humanities Center, our PAX instructors who are here, and our PAX advisors and our alumni. Thank you especially to all our DePaul students. You give us hope. Yes. And it's very inspiring when we hear that narrative on the news that's telling us that we're powerless and that it's a hopeless world. We'll remember the power of these stories and the love in the room, the love out in the community. So thank you so much. This is why we love doing the work that we do. So thank you. Thanks.